Chief, the commissioning, the cost of freedom. Welcome, everyone. I'm David Asman in for Neil Cavuto. You are looking live at the USS Gerold R. Ford in Norfolk, Virginia. Brand new aircraft carrier. This is the largest aircraft carrier in the world. There is no other like it, and it belongs to America.
Yep, I got you.
President Donald Trump and Defense Secretary James Mattis about to take part in the commissioning. We're going to hear from both of them. First, though, to Leland Vittert, who is there on what is an incredible ship. And you've got details, Leland.
Well, David, good afternoon, good morning from Norfolk, Virginia. You're watching now the V-22 Ospreys begin landing here on the Gerold Ford. It will become the USS Gerold Ford once the president commissions it here in just about an hour or so as this ceremony goes on. The ship itself is 1,092 feet in length and cost $12.9 billion. Like so many military projects, it has been over budget, and there's been a lot of controversy surrounding the cost. We broke it down. That's $113 million per foot, and that includes a lot of new technology here on this ship. New what they call dual band radar that will allow it to see over the horizon for threats. We know the Chinese have been trying to come up with carrier killer missiles. That radar will help with that. Pretty loud as you hear these helicopters come in. We're told that they've been doing touch and goes on the flight deck. The flight deck is so new that in the past, when they've landed, there's been the spraying of what they call the non-skid paint that's flown off, and they had to get that off. So over the past 48 hours or so, they've been landing the V-22s here that carry the presidential support staff. This is not yet Marine One coming in, and they've been trying to land them to blow off the no-skid paint, getting rid of the new paint smell, if you will. You get a sense of just how loud it is out here on the flight deck of an aircraft carrier when you hear these come in, and this isn't even the F-18, another plane that will be landing here on the Gerold Ford just in the next week when they take it out for sea trials. And everything about the Gerold Ford is new. The catapults that will launch the plane off are brand new types. They're electromagnetic, and even President Trump has weighed in about the cost of these electromagnetic catapults and said, will they work? I talked to the Chief of Naval Operations just a little while ago inside the hangar bay here, and he said it's not an if, it's a promise. They will work, and they've been showing videos of some of the test runs with those electromagnetic catapults. And those are really important because in the past, carriers have used steam catapults. The electromagnetic ones work much faster, so they can launch about twice as many planes. The other thing that these catapults do is they can launch much heavier aircraft and then also lighter unmanned aircraft. And that's one thing the Navy's been looking at for the Gerold Ford and some of the other carriers is the idea of an unmanned aircraft. These are the V-22 Ospreys now landing on the Gerold Ford. They carry some of the presidential support staff. We've yet to see Marine One in sight. They're coming from an airport about 2 or 3 miles away here. Another thing about this ship that they've done is they've really reworked all the engineering. There's no steam driving this. It's all an electric system to help with everything from pumping water to pumping the gas into the aircraft. 2 nuclear reactors here power this ship. About 4,500 sailors and Marines will eventually be on board. And everything, David, they've had to work on, including better air conditioning, because they figured out that over time, the heat and the humidity, even in the hangar bays, break down the airplanes. And they think they can save a lot of money on maintenance by having better air conditioning of all things. This may be the beginning of the commissioning ceremony, and once it's commissioned, it's the USS Gerold Ford. You'll note behind me what they call the island, and that's the superstructure that comes up from the flight deck there. You see the bridge where the red, white, and blue bunting is. That's a lot smaller, so they've redesigned the flight deck to be able to accommodate more aircraft and different kinds of aircraft here on the Gerold Ford. Again, trying to be able to do more with less. They only have now, with the Ford coming online, 11 aircraft carriers. The Navy says they would really like 12 to be able to project the kind of power they want all over the world. And the United States is really the only Navy in the world that can project power in what they call blue water, far, far away. And the Chief of Naval Operations was talking about just how stressed they've been. The Gerold Ford from here will head out to sea next week, and that's when they are going to begin to launch aircraft on and off of it as part of their sea trials, testing out that electromagnetic catapult. And then it's going to be a couple more years to test all of the new systems on here before that actually goes out on a deployment. What we would think about is heading off to either go fight ISIS, go project American power against North Korea somewhere in the world. A lot of discussion about the cost here. As we said, $12.9 billion to build this ship. It is the newest in what they call the USS Nimitz class. That's all of the aircraft carriers. Eisenhower, that I'm standing on right now, was built in 1977. So you can imagine there's a lot of rust, a lot of technology has changed, and a lot has gone into this ship to try and get the most out of that $12.9 billion. As the Chief of Naval Operations told us earlier, the final commanding officer of this ship has not even been born yet. They expect that it will last some 50 years in service. So it's been designed to be able to receive technological upgrades as they happen. You think about the U.S. Eisenhower, when it was designed in 1977 and went to sea, the internet didn't even exist. So imagine the technology that will be put onto the Gerold Ford in the next 50 or so years. The Navy facing a lot of criticism on the cost and a lot of questions about, will all this new technology work? They had the new destroyer, the USS Zumwalt, that cost $3 billion. It put to sea a couple of years ago and has since had innumerable problems with some of the newfangled technology, and that's one thing the Navy has worked really hard on here with the Gerold Ford to try to make sure they don't have those same problems going forward.
Leland Bitter,
35 miles an hour, and they've made a lot about this carrier in terms of that they've beefed up its propulsion and the design of the hull. And we walked on it, you still get the new ship smell when you walk on this ship in terms of just how new it is, how sleek it is, and a lot has gone in to make it more efficient. When they'll show you some images of the flight deck here, there's two aircraft on the flight deck, an FA-18, and that is one of the Navy's primary fighter attack planes, and then also an F-35, David. A lot of people have said, well, how did they get there if they didn't fly on? Just to show you sort of the sense of what this has been, they're now bringing these planes on, and they had to crane them on yesterday for what they are now saying is the cap-off from the White House of Made in America Week, David.
It is Made in America Week. There's no finer product Made in America Week. We did pay for it, as you mentioned, at a 50% greater cost than we thought it would cost. But Leland, just terrific job. That was 8 minutes of description, and I think the engineer could do no better in describing what went into that ship and what's going on that ship. Let me bring in retired four-star General Jack Keane, to talk about this in relation to the president's plans for our military, which are huge, to use one of the president's expressions. This is an example. Now, we should mention, of course, that obviously this thing has been in production for years and in design for years, but it is symbolic, is it not, General, of what the president wants to do to try to transform our military?
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. This is a new class of aircraft carrier. The Nimitz class, which Leland referred to, has been around for 40 years. So there's two other aircraft carriers going to follow this one that will be built remarkably the same as we've got here, with all the advanced technology that Leland was speaking of. One of the things that's very attractive about this also, given all the new technology, the ship's company, which is going to be 2,600, is actually 600 less than what's on the Nimitz class today. So that is a great accomplishment to the people who've designed this technology, that we can have that many people less on the ship. And also, the quality of care for the sailors on the ship is going to be much improved, as well as the maintenance on the ship. So it'll cost us less to take care of this ship as it has the other class. Also, we should understand that the Navy is contemplating eventually going to smaller aircraft carriers because of the evolving threat that's out there, particularly from the Chinese and the Russians, and their ability to swarm missiles at our ships at sea. But yes, this is really part of of a buildup that the United States military is undertaking. The first true signs of that are really the 2018 budget, and the Congress on the Senate side and on the House side are moving actually to increase the president's submission by some $37 billion over what he proposed, which is pretty significant that the Congress of the United States and the president are together, that we've got to improve the capability of the United States military.
Well, General, let's talk about cost a little, because Donald Trump, even before he was president, when he was president-elect, began to put some pressure on some companies, contractors working for the military. This thing is twice over budget. It was supposed to come in at about $6.5 billion. It came in at $12.9 billion, almost double what the estimate was. Is there any chance that the president could get some of that spending in line?
Well, I think he's absolutely going to do that. Jim Mattis, who's the Secretary of Defense, clearly understands this issue. His number two guy is a businessman. I think that's a step in the right direction to bring somebody in who has business experience, who deals with cost as a routine every single day to get cost out of everything. Anybody that's run a major corporation understands that. Right. And people who have run operations in the Pentagon in the past, quite frankly, don't understand that. We've passed a budget, and we're measured on our effectiveness to spend every dime we've got.
Forgive me, General, for interrupting, but you could just see a little sliver there of Marine One. That is the name for the helicopter that carries the president wherever he is in the world. It's called Marine One. No more so than at Norfolk, which is the home of one of the biggest naval operations in the world, perhaps the biggest. General, one thing as we're talking about costs, the president now, I assume, has landed on the deck of the Gerold Ford. We're talking about costs, and you in particular, a lot of times bureaucracies have a way of just building on top of themselves, and the Pentagon is a bureaucracy. It may be a more efficient, more vital bureaucracy than any others, but it is a bureaucracy. You yourself have been critical of some of their spending, as we're again looking at that may be Marine One. It's the last helicopter to arrive, as a couple of helicopters with support staff arrived before. Does the bureaucracy of the Pentagon itself need to be held in? Are they spending money in the wrong places, perhaps in perpetuating their bureaucracy instead of building beautiful ships like this?
Yeah, what the United States military does very well at, and the American people see it all the time, is we know how to fight and we know how to win.
Yeah.
And that's the strength of the United States military. But to do that requires significant business-like functions. The Pentagon's not a business, but it requires business-like functions to support this huge enterprise, and it's the largest of its kind in the world. It manages real estate. It manages motels. It manages installations, training bases, shipyards, and I could go airfields. I can go on and on and on with all of that. And some of that is, frankly, not done very well because we don't have really good business people doing things like that. We have civil servants who do that, and much of them don't have the kind of experience and motivation that are driven by profit and loss out in the private sector. So yes, the strength of the United States military is our capabilities and the people who use those capabilities and our ability to win. The problem with the United States military is its bureaucracy, is its business-like functions, and they could be dramatically improved, and there's a lot of money that we can save there.
Right. And we do have a businessman as president who has a particular interest in cutting costs in the military. Leland Vittert is on the ship right next door to the Gerold Ford, and Leland, I understand the announcement was made, the president is on deck.
That's correct, David, and they ring the ship's bell and you hear the announcement that the United States has arrived. The President of the United States now on the deck. The Marine One helicopters have landed, and he's going to make his way down from the flight deck. He'll see the F-35 that you all talked about, that he had talked about as President-elect, about bringing the cost of the F-35 down. He'll see the F-A-18s, and then he'll walk down into the hangar bay. And that is where you see the gangways going up on the screen there. That's going into the hangar bay, and that big banner, Made in the USA. This has been a tough week for the president politically, if you will, and this is a chance for them to change the optics. This is the end of Made in America week. They're pushing Made in America products. We saw that at the White House earlier with everything from the fire trucks to the Stetson hats earlier in the week that the president talked about and sort of really showcased, and now coming here